A filmmaker was found brutally murdered in her London flat, and now her own sister stands accused. A missing diamond Rolex, a locked-up corgi, and a chilling scene of violence are at the heart of a case that has shocked the arts world and raised disturbing questions about family, motive, and possible betrayal. And we're going to break it all down for you right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is another Law&Crime legal alert. If you received Depo-Provera birth control shots and were later diagnosed with a brain or spinal tumor called meningioma, you may be eligible for a lawsuit. That's right, Morgan & Morgan, they're investigating claims that patients weren't properly warned about this risk. It's free to check, just takes a few minutes, and you don't pay unless they win. So scan the QR code on screen, click the link below, or go to forthepeople.com/LCDepo to see if you qualify. Jennifer Abbott Dauward, an internationally acclaimed filmmaker, known professionally as reportedly as Sarah Steinberg, was found stabbed to death in her Camden flat, her diamond-encrusted Rolex watch missing, and her beloved corgi, Prince, locked alone in a bathroom for days. This is according to the Times UK. But now, authorities say the person responsible for her murder is her own sister, 69-year-old Nancy Pexton. Lot to break down here about what happened, or what maybe happened, and what investigators have apparently uncovered, and how this devastating loss has impacted those who knew this independent artist. According to an official police release, on the evening of June 13th, officers entered Jennifer Abbott's ground floor flat on Mornington Place. This is after her niece had raised concerns for her well-being. In fact, a neighbor who spoke to the Times UK on condition of anonymity said that Abbott's niece had approached them in distress, prompting the neighbor's son to force entry into the apartment. The neighbor told the outlet, quote, "My son broke the door down. We heard her niece shouting, 'Somebody help me, somebody help.' And we went out and asked what's wrong. She said, 'I haven't heard from my auntie in 4 days. Something's wrong. Break the door down.' I was holding the door open downstairs and my son was upstairs, and then I heard her niece screaming and saying, 'Oh my God, she's been murdered.' She had tape across her mouth. Her corgi was locked in the bathroom for 3 days. That poor dog, he couldn't even drink any water. It's amazing he was even still alive." So when police went in, they made a horrific discovery, like you just heard. The filmmaker's body, partially wrapped in a blanket, tape over her mouth. In fact, a post-mortem examination revealed she had been stabbed multiple times, 8 times in the neck. A killing so violent, it was ruled to have been caused by sharp force trauma. But there was one critical detail that stood out. Her luxury Rolex watch, which apparently she was rarely seen without, was gone. So what happens? Days later, on June 18th, police made a shocking arrest. The suspect, her own sister, again, Nancy Pexton, Abbott's younger sibling by just 9 months, this is the person who was arrested. Now, Pexton actually appeared in court via video link from a Bronzefield prison. The Guardian reports that she has no set home and during the hearing only spoke to tell them her name and her birthday. So what went wrong? Well, I'll tell you what, that's not clear. Because when you dive into social media, it seems to paint a picture of what once appeared to be a happy, close-knit relationship between the two sisters. Smiling in photos, Jennifer and Nancy Pexton seem to share fond memories, good times. In fact, one post has a caption that reads, "Watch Jennifer and Nancy Pexton singing at Chuckanuts." That, by the way, is a mountain range in Washington State, and having lots of fun. Underneath that post are pictures of the two of them from that adventure back in September of 2015. Another collection of pictures from 2015 shows the two having fun in Vancouver, Canada, riding a seaplane together. The caption on that post reads, "Planes, trains, and automobiles, beautiful Canada, Vancouver vacation, took a ride on the seaplane." But apparently behind the scenes, was there a darker rift? If so, what fueled it? Well, police are now investigating a possible motive of this death, of this killing of a filmmaker who made incredible films and was a renowned member in the industry. And that, again, is the missing Rolex watch, because that may be a critical clue in all of this, or at least a critical piece of evidence. The watch, this diamond-encrusted Rolex, was a signature piece that she was rarely seen without. So could this have been, a robbery gone wrong, a bitter family dispute that turned deadly? One of the things that's interesting about this is that neighbors described Jennifer as this, quote, vivacious presence in the building. But they also noted growing concerns regarding her safety. Some had said that she had become increasingly fearful in recent weeks due to reportedly some sort of antisocial behavior outside her home or who was outside of her home. One told the Times UK, quote, "She broke down in tears recently. She told a friend she was too scared to sleep." Okay, so to help me break all of this down, I want to bring on a special guest, Canadian criminal defense attorney Ian Runkle. Ian, so good to have you here on Sidebar. I don't recall if we've had an attorney from Canada before, so this is a great honor for me. I'm very happy to have you on. And by the way, for people who don't know, you have a specialization in these types of cases in a way, right?
I do criminal defense and firearms law, although the local law society doesn't like us, or doesn't allow us to use the word specialization for anything. But that is what I do. That's my interest, for sure.
Good thing is I'm not the law society. I'm just the host of Sidebar, and so I can call you whatever I want.
You can say it. I can't.
Okay, well, fair enough. Look, to get into this now, because this is just such an unfortunate case. When you look at this, right? Given the nature of this case, a violent homicide, a family member accused, what strikes out to you at first? What are maybe the legal challenges prosecutors might face? What do you think might be the advantages for the prosecution? What are just some of the factors if we're taking the allegations as true, that this could be a family member attacking another family member?
I mean, the details we have seem to suggest the family member pretty strongly, because you've got a situation where they find the deceased, they find them with sort of a stab wound, which, apparently multiple stab wounds, but the fatal one to the neck, covered up. But then apparently the sister is arrested in hospital, and when they search her bag, they find the missing Rolex, because the victim was known to wear a Rolex, and that's gone. And then so they find that. If it's the case, like, assuming all of this works out and you've got sort of a very unique piece of jewelry that is not going to be something that's in, it's not like a Timex that you might have thousands and thousands of people wearing, that shows up in the property of the accused, that's going to be very hard to explain. And I kind of wonder, because doing some research for this, I saw that the UK has had a large number of sort of organized crime attacks on sort of wealthy people in order to steal Rolexes. I wonder if the goal wasn't to sort of hope to deflect attention that way, and then that falls apart, of course, if they find the Rolex on you as opposed to somewhere else. But she might be in some difficult trouble here. I read the case stories, and one of the first things is sort of some signs of maybe trying to tamper with or deflect in terms of the evidence. The victim is supposedly was found with tape over her mouth, but police have found indications that the tape was applied post-mortem, not before death. And that's some of the indications I've seen are blood that was on the roll of tape, blood on the exterior. If that's the case, you wonder, if somebody's deceased, why would you put tape over their mouth? And the obvious answer there becomes, well, maybe you want this thing to look like something it isn't. That's sort of one of the things that leapt out at me. It'll be an interesting case for sure.
Yeah, Ian, that's bad, right? Having the missing piece that apparently she never took off, very specific piece on her. But what about this? The prosecutor in this case, Ben Holt, said that Abbott was last seen on CCTV footage walking her dog home at about 7:30 a.m. June 10th. And then, quote, the defendant visited her at 12:30 that afternoon and left 1 hour later, okay? So we talk about it all the time. The CCTV footage, the surveillance footage, the Ring doorbell footage, that becomes a timeline now. That becomes placing you at a specific point. I mean, that feels like a really impactful piece of evidence.
London is actually one of the most surveilled cities on the planet. There's cameras everywhere. If if you ever go, you'll notice the cameras there. It's going to be difficult if they can't point to anybody else that was there. And certainly the other aspect is that the UK justice system has less of a focus on your right not to speak. There's a different way they handle that. And so not being able to come up with an explanation or to provide an explanation for that time frame might actually be a difficult problem, because at a trial, certainly they're going to say visited at the key time frame, and if we assume that the person, if we assume that they've got the right person, it'll probably dial back. They'll do their medical examination, they'll say time of death is about that time frame. This would not be a fun case to defend. I mean, you defend it to the best of your ability, but sometimes to the best of your ability, you know where it's going to land. And so far, it seems like they've got all arrows pointed in one direction.
Let me ask you this. Sometimes you can tell from the way someone is killed, it can tell a piece of the story. I remember we were covering the Mangione, the Luigi Mangione case in New York, and when Brian Thompson was killed, the first thought was, well, this looks like a planned assassination, right? The way it happened. If you're looking at a violent attack with a knife, let's say, and you're talking about multiple stab wounds, particularly in the neck, does that give you an indication about what might have happened? Does that give you an indication? They talk about sometimes that up close and personal attack usually can be committed by somebody who knows the victim, or there might be a struggle, or there might be that who can get into that, be that close, up close to somebody to be able to inflict that kind of damage. Does it tell you something?
I mean, one of the things I noticed from the reports was that apparently there was a knife missing out of the knife block in the, in the place. And to me, that is very characteristic of a family member, a loved one, some dispute like that, where people get arguing and then somebody reaches over and grabs a knife and it turns bad. Usually when you see like a break and enter kind of, if something like that goes on, they'll have either brought their own knife or their own firearm or whatever. Or you get situations where the knife block is less common there. They'll grab something that's either immediately close to hand, or often you'll get sort of beatings that turn into something else. But that sort of knife block thing to me very much says, family member. And again, seeing the tape applied after death, to me, when I look at that, I think, okay, that's somebody who knows them and somebody who's connected to them, but wants to make it maybe look like wants to maybe make it look like a robbery, because and I mean, all of this is initial impressions and sort of hunches.
It's fair.
As opposed
that's
to,
fair.
I don't have a forensic background, but
that's
just
fair.
from my experience. And so when they said the sister was arrested, and I went, yeah, that tracks. That fits with all of the sort of feelings there. So.
Well, that's the part that's confusing. If she really did do this, and we were talking before, they seem to have a close relationship. There was pictures online of them together. Is that, in your experience, someone could snap. There could be a change in a relationship. You really don't know what's going on within a family. But we sometimes look at social media and we sometimes look on the outside, and it doesn't tell the full picture. Again, she's innocent until proven guilty. I believe that's what the standard is there. But I imagine, in your experience, you might be saying, Jesse, this happens all the time.
It does, and you often don't necessarily know what's going on in a family. Abusive families, often to the outside, don't necessarily look abusive because people hide those things, but you also typically can't see things like jealousies and, rivalries and so forth. I can't say for certain. I also note that the reports are that the accused was picked up in hospital. Now, I wonder what sort of hospital, what's the scenario there, because it could be a mental health issue. I'm, again, speculating, but I can imagine all sorts of ways this breaks down. If there's a financial thing, if you've got one sibling who's doing way better off than the other, and maybe they say, well, I'm not providing you with money anymore. I want you out of my life, and that might provoke anger. We don't know. I mean, there could be all sorts of things, but generally there are no fights quite as vicious as family fights. You see this with when a parent dies and all of the kids just hate each other because they're fighting over the will. The the stakes are higher because the emotions run higher.
No, it's 100% true. I cover a number of these kinds of cases, unfortunately, here on Sidebar. So what you're saying is, I don't care if it happens here. I don't care if it happens abroad. The motivations don't change. But here's the thing that I think is interesting as well. So Paxton is set to enter a plea on September 9th, we believe, based on the reporting. That's a period of time. So a significant period of time between now and the plea, right? Is that period of time tell you something? Is it significant? Do you look for a change in circumstances? What could happen between now and when she would enter a plea?
I mean, often pleas are sort of delayed, especially sort of under different systems here. The U.S., my understanding is that people tend to sort of enter a plea fairly early. In Canada, we tend to enter a plea fairly late because here we're not expected to enter a plea until we've got all of the information that that the Crown has, the government. So I suspect what you'll see is there'll be some discussions, some trading of evidence, some passing along of what the case looks like. And her lawyers are going to have a difficult conversation about what they want to do. Often when you've got a murder charge, people are more inclined to fight it, even when the evidence is overwhelming against them, just because the stakes are so high, right? It's why not roll the dice if the alternative is life in prison? And when you're talking about an accused who's more advanced in age, I understand they're in their 60s. Getting a 20-year sentence is life, right? It's not. There's no sort of happily ever after at the end of that. So we may well see a trial just on the basis of, well, here's hoping there's something comes out.
And what would that defense look like? Would it be what we talked about before? Hey, did she really do this? They had a loving kind of relationship. It seems strange she would do this. Is it self-defense? Is there a mental health issue afoot? One of the things that came up, I mentioned, is during her initial hearing, she apparently didn't have a set home. What was the dynamic between them? What are certain things that you think that defense attorneys might be exploring if they actually do want to take this to a trial?
Mental health is obviously going to be a major consideration. If there's a mental health issue, they may look at, are there any possibilities? And possibilities can come not just from the evidence that exists, but also from evidence that doesn't exist. If they're going to be going through CCTV footage going, okay, sure, they've said that it captures our client at this time, but does it capture anyone else who could have gone in there? Is there some other possibility? Could it be a self-defense situation? Could it be, and those things those things may come from other evidence. For instance, if there's certain knife injuries on the hands of the accused, it might indicate that they, for instance, struggled to get the knife. That could be a different sort of scenario there. All of this, and sometimes all you can do is damage control, because sometimes what you're looking to do is work out a plea that is less bad for your client, but we can't say what exactly they're looking at here. When I saw the no fixed address, I'm not sure what to think of that, because sometimes that's a sign of mental illness or poverty, where you've got somebody who's living on the street. But with wealthy individuals, and I don't know sort of what her financial situation is and how much support she was maybe receiving and so forth. Sometimes you have wealthy individuals who have no fixed address because they just live in very nice hotels, moving from hotel to hotel. So all of this, I don't know yet, but and if there's a mental health issue, then this becomes it adds another layer of tragedy to it as well.
I mentioned this before, the neighbors had said she'd becoming, increasingly fearful in the weeks leading up to her death. There was this, again, I'll read it. She broke down in tears recently. She told a friend she was too scared to sleep. Whether what was going on outside of her building was an issue. I wonder if that's something the defense will point to. What was going on in her life? Did she make any kind of enemies? the sister might have been on CCTV footage, but is it possible someone else went in? I wonder pointing to alternative suspects is a potential theory, but there's got to be something there.
Yeah, the problem is if you just sort of argue an alternative suspect in terms of someone else could have done it, that doesn't tend to go anywhere unless you've actually got some basis for it. Like this figure that you see on the CCTV could be the person, right? If you've got something where there's, somebody dressed in a ski mask also went into the building, now you've got a credible theory, right? It's the ski mask person. I also would love to see the breakdown of why the increasing fear, right? And it might be, these days your cell phone, it records everything. It used to be in the sort of days before my practice, really. If you called somebody up on, the old dial telephone, there wouldn't be much of a record of it. There might be a record of a connection, but not of the content. Nowadays, so much discussion happens via text, and so we might, for instance, see reports of, threatening texts and so forth. If this was a relationship breaking down, then that might actually worsen things. She was afraid, and look at the texts that were coming in, and you can see why. But it might be something else, right? It might be that she was concerned that, that there were burglars in the area, that the neighborhood was getting bad, these kinds of things. It's too early to say a whole lot, but there's certainly some possibilities, and some of them might not be good for the accused, assuming that that's correct. So we'll have to see.
I had to ask you about this before we wrap things up. So she reportedly appeared in court via this video link. And aside from saying that she didn't have a confirmed home, what she did confirm was just her name and date of birth. Is that typical for an initial appearance like that?
I mean, often they don't want to say much in initial appearance because you're
Sure.
not, you're not going to lay out your theory of the case. You're not going to anything. Typically, these are just docket appearances. And so it's essentially for the court to manage its own processes. So they bring the person before the court so that the court can see that they've been arrested and basically, take hold of them in a fashion. And then they'll set another court date. But a lot of those initial docket appearances will just be in order to sort of continue managing the case. Come back in however long. We'll see if we're ready to take, another substantial step like setting a trial date or entering a plea or something like that. But not, it might get pushed further on. We have similar processes in Canada, and it drives the news reporters crazy because they'll go to the first court appearance and it'll just be, okay, so-and-so didn't speak to bail and the matter was put over to, next month. And this will happen several times, and the reporters they won't have a whole lot to say because just nothing happens. So
Right.
It wasn't surprising to me.
Well, look, aside from the legal aspects, the human aspect of it is Abbott's death. It leaves this void. Family, friends, people who knew her in the industry. And as the case heads to court, there are all these questions that remain. What drove this violence? If the sister did it, was it greed? Was it resentment? We don't know. And we also don't know all the evidence that might be presented and what the defense might be. But for now, the woman who spent her life, exposing different truths through film has now left behind a mystery of her own. And we will see which way it unfolds. Ian Runkle, thank you so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.